Millie Mouse lived in a cozy house under an oak tree. It was a small house, but Millie loved it. It had a little door, a tiny window, and a soft bed of moss. Millie spent her days helping her neighbors. She was a very kind mouse.
One sunny morning, Millie woke up early. She stretched her tiny paws and wiggled her nose. Today was going to be different. Today, Millie had a plan.
Millie decided to spend the day at the lake. The sun was shining brightly, and the gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming flowers. It was the perfect day to be outdoors, away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. She would pack a picnic basket and sit by the water. Millie loved the idea of enjoying a meal surrounded by nature's beauty. She carefully selected her favorite foods, making sure everything was just right. She would read her favorite book and watch the butterflies flutter by. The lake was her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in the pages of a good story while the world around her seemed to pause. It would be a day just for her. No interruptions, no responsibilities, just pure relaxation and enjoyment. Millie cherished these moments of solitude where she could recharge and find peace.
Millie hummed a happy tune as she gathered her things. Her heart was light, and she felt a sense of excitement for the day ahead. She knew it was going to be special. She packed a juicy red apple, a chunk of cheese, and some freshly baked bread. Each item was chosen with care, ensuring her picnic would be delightful, and a tiny bottle of blueberry juice. The juice was her favorite, a sweet and tangy treat that always made her smile. She grabbed her favorite book, a collection of fairy tales filled with magical stories that transported her to far-off lands and adventures, and skipped out the door. The world outside was waiting, and Millie was ready to embrace it with open arms. Today was her day, a day for herself, and she intended to make the most of every moment.
Millie didn't get far before she heard a sniffle. It was coming from Mrs. Rabbit, who was sitting by her burrow. Mrs. Rabbit had tears in her eyes.
What's wrong?
Oh, Millie, I've lost my knitting needle. I can't finish knitting little mittens for my bunnies without it.
Millie knew she couldn't leave Mrs. Rabbit in distress. Section 4. The Lost Button. In the heart of the forest, where the trees whispered secrets and the flowers danced in the breeze, lived a little mouse named Millie and her friend Mrs. Rabbit.
Millie searched high and low for the missing knitting needle. She looked under rocks, behind bushes, and even in the hollow of the oak tree. The forest was vast, and Millie knew every nook and cranny, but the needle seemed to have vanished into thin air. She climbed up the oak tree, peering into every crevice, hoping to catch a glimpse of the shiny needle. The oak tree was ancient, with many hiding spots, but Millie was determined. Finally, she found it stuck in a spider web. The delicate web glistened in the sunlight, and there, tangled in the threads, was the needle. Millie carefully freed the needle, making sure not to damage the spider's home. Millie carefully freed the needle and returned it to Mrs. Rabbit. Mrs. Rabbit had been anxiously waiting, her paws fidgeting with worry. When she saw Millie approaching with the needle, her face lit up with joy.
Mrs. Rabbit was overjoyed. She had been working on a special blanket for her newborn bunnies, and the needle was essential. The entire rabbit family gathered around, their eyes sparkling with gratitude.
Thank you, Millie. You're a lifesaver, Mrs. Rabbit exclaimed, her voice filled with emotion. The other animals in the forest had also gathered, witnessing the heartwarming moment.
Millie smiled, happy to have helped. She felt a warm glow inside, knowing she had made a difference. The forest was not just a place to live. It was a community where everyone looked out for each other. She said goodbye to Mrs. Rabbit and continued on her way. As she walked through the forest, the sun setting behind her, Millie felt a sense of accomplishment. She knew that no matter what challenges came her way, she would always be ready to help her friends. Millie called up to him.
I was gathering nuts for the winter, and I dropped my biggest find right into that hole. It's too deep for me to reach.
Section 5. A Helping Paw for Sammy.
As Millie approached the lake, she saw Sammy Squirrel sitting on a branch looking distressed. What's the matter, Sammy?
Millie knew she had to help Sammy retrieve his precious nut. Section 6. Millie's Joyful Heart. Millie was a small mouse with a big heart, always ready to lend a helping hand to her friends in need. Her days were filled with little adventures and acts of kindness that brought joy to everyone around her.
One sunny morning, Millie quickly found a long twig while exploring the forest. She had a knack for finding useful things in nature. She carefully lowered it into a hole where her friend Sammy had fallen. Millie knew she had to act fast to help him out. Sammy clung to the other end of the twig, his tiny paws gripping tightly as Millie steadied herself. With all her strength, Millie pulled him up inch by inch until Sammy was safely out of the hole. It was a tough task, but Millie's determination never wavered.
Once Sammy was safe, he scurried back down to retrieve his precious nut, which he had dropped in the commotion. He held it tightly, his little chest puffed out with pride for having such a brave friend. Sammy stood tall, feeling proud and grateful for Millie's quick thinking and bravery.
Thank you, Millie, for your quick thinking and for saving me, Sammy said, his voice filled with gratitude.
As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the forest, Millie felt a sense of accomplishment. She had spent her day helping her friends, and that made her heart swell with joy. Millie finally reached the lake, a place she loved to visit for its tranquility and beauty. She had planned to have a picnic and read her favorite book by the water, but as she looked around, she realized she didn't have time for her picnic or her book. The day had flown by with all the unexpected events. Millie had spent the day helping her friends, and that was more fulfilling than any picnic or book could ever be. She saw her friends happy and safe, and that was enough for her. Her heart was full of joy, knowing she'd made a difference in their lives. Millie sat by the lake, reflecting on the day's events. She had learned that sometimes the best days are not the ones we plan meticulously, but the ones where we open our hearts to help others and embrace the unexpected moments. Millie knew that her joyful heart was her greatest treasure, and she was grateful for the chance to share it with her friends. She looked forward to more days filled with kindness, adventure, and the simple joy of helping others.